welcome to everyone. My name is Chris Kerr. I'm the Executive Director of the Ignatian Solidarity Network. And on behalf of our staff, we're really grateful to have you with us today. This presentation today that we're going to have is part of kind of a series of offerings that we've had over the course of the year, really starting last fall with the Ignatian Family Teaching for Justice, when we had an entire block of programming around diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. And we've been really excited to partner with some colleagues across the country engaged in this work, and not just engaged, I should say, who are leaders in this work. In a second, I'm going to introduce Jamal Adams at Loyola High. And I was actually with Jamal last night, as well as maybe some others who are on this call today, 4 high schools out in the western part of the country, Loyola, Bellarmine in San Jose, Xavier Palm Desert, and Regis Jesuit in Denver, are taking part in a collective kind of racial equity kind of learning and experience over the next 21 days in partnership with ISN. And what was exciting to see of that was that the leadership that is happening, the ways that people are stepping up and saying, as Jesuit institutions, we want to be out in front in this work. We want to be the leaders in the church and our local communities in this very intentional work. So to be able to talk about the idea of mission-driven hiring for equity, diversity, and cultural competence, this is really important. It gets us into the systemic work of disrupting racial inequity in our society, and this is what we're called to be doing in Jesuit institutions. So really grateful to have everyone with us here today. Excited for what can be shared by Christina and Terri. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamal now to get things going with some Q&A. So Jamal, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. And again, it's I want to also echo Chris's sentiments. It has been a tremendous honor and also very fruitful for myself and then so many of my colleagues, so many DEI practitioners around the country at our secondary schools to be in partnership with the ISN, with Erin and Kim and the tremendous staff that the ISN, Ignatian Solidarity Network, has at its disposal. We are just thrilled by the opportunity to elevate this, and Chris, in his more than humble way, was our keynote speaker last night, and really set a path and set the table for us. Really, I thought, energized our crowd. So many of my colleagues who didn't know Chris, other than the guy that get emails from, got a chance to see him speak, particularly from his heart, from his own personal experience. And again, we couldn't be more grateful for his presence last night, and then this opportunity today. Chris and I, Christina, and I, in our roles at our schools, were part of that leadership group that brought Chris Kerr in, and to say that our relationship with Chris goes back a number of years is an understatement, but we're honored to have him. And so today, my function really is to try to help facilitate this conversation, to bring questions to the forefront. I think in a very real way, I'm blessed since I say this all the time, the pandemic has allowed us to collaborate in ways that we never had imagined. And I think about a year ago, so many of us that are DEI practitioners at the secondary ed level started to communicate and have a weekly call, a Zoom call, to try to build coalition, to understand the different power dynamics in our schools, and also just to share best practices, and probably most importantly, to lift each other's spirits in some of our more difficult and darkest days. And out of that has been a ton of great collaborations, and this is one of them. Both Christina and Terri bring a wealth of a long-lasting experience, not only as practitioners in the DEI space, but but particularly when speaking in our groups and then obviously in their presentation, really thinking about helping the institutions that they have worked for think really critically and intentionally about how they hire folks in a way that that speaks to our DEI and A mission. And so that's my role today, to help a little bit. Like so many Jesuit educators, I have a ton of roles. So about 12:44, I am going to duck out to go teach. And at what point, Erin will pick up from here. But again, I'm excited. I'm honored. These two brilliant women are here to help us, and I look forward to helping facilitate the conversation. So to get us started, I'm going to posit this first question to them both. I think they both thought a little bit about this and have some unique perspectives. And then from there, hopefully, our crowd will generate some more questions, and we'll go from there. So, excuse me. So for Terri and Christina, the question often starts with the idea of like, where do we post our jobs? So can you guys talk a little bit about the idea of where are you posting jobs to attract diverse talent and mine diverse talent to bring to your campuses, and how integral of that plays a role in meeting your strategic plan of diversifying your adult community?
So I'll start with this one.
Yes.
I want to say first that a lot of people think that this is the first step, like where do we post our jobs? That this is the first step that we're going to make in terms of diversifying our faculty and diversifying our staff, our support system. Because as soon as we get the position out there, we'll get all kinds of candidates, and this is where we start. And it's not. This is definitely not the first step. The internal really has to come first. It's really important for us to take a look inside at what is our process and what are we doing within that process. Just because you post it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to get an interview. And if people don't get an interview and they don't get hired, then no matter where you post it, people are going to stop applying. So you really have to have a situation set up where you have examined everything that goes on inside your institution in order to, before you begin to, in a sense, invite people to interview for your institution. I think, again, it's important to look at that process internally first, your interview process. And when I say the interview process, I mean starting from the beginning piece of reviewing applications. Like, who's on the committee to review those applications? Whose voice is being heard in that committee? Do you have someone who has a diverse perspective, whose role on the committee is to bring that diverse perspective? Now, on one hand, theoretically, we would like everybody on the committee to have that perspective. But, if I'm a department person, a department chair, then my top priority is going to be my content. If I'm an administrator, my top priority is going to be the school in general. And yeah, we might bring in some of these other ideas about the importance of diversity. And yes, this is a goal that we have, but having someone on that committee whose voice is to be the voice saying, this is important. We need to think about this. Let me look at it from a different way. Let me talk about it from a different way, is going to be crucial. So who's on that hiring committee is really important. How are we reading the interview or the applications is our second step. And really sitting down and examining that process is really important. What are the biases that we're bringing? As an institution, we all have biases. For example, as a Jesuit institution, we have a bias towards people who graduated from Jesuit universities. We want to hire people who went to our schools, whether that be they graduated from a high school or a college that's a Jesuit school, like regardless, like we want to hire Jesuit educated people. That's a bias that we have. Well, we need to recognize that moving in, especially if we're trying to diversify, because taking a look at our high schools and our colleges, at the demographics of those, the numbers for Jesuit educated people of color isn't going to be as large as the number of Jesuit educated white people. So we need to think about that. That's just an example, right? What are the biases that we're bringing? What are the barriers that we have in terms of offering an interview to someone? What are some of the qualifications that we're looking for that might not be required, but in our mind feel a little bit more required, even if they're not listed? So what are some of the barriers that people might have to cross over in order to get an interview? Taking a look at some of the interview data that we have collected to say who is in the past, who has been getting interviews. And we had for example, English position that was opened last year. Well, let's look back at the data. How many people of color applied for that position? How many of those people of color were offered a chance to interview? Who was hired, right? Being able to look back at the data will give us an idea of where some of those biases might be. It'll give us a starting point for discussion around some of those things. And I think only once we've explored all of those different things are we then going to be able to start thinking about where are we posting. It's not the first step. That being said, where do we post? Well, I think a lot of places, right?
Yes.
Like the
that's
more, the
that's
better.
Gonna be different for various institutions. For, if you are a high school, or if you are pre-K through 8th, if you are a university. So there are organizations that their main purpose is to help universities, help private schools attract diverse pool of candidates. And we can share those, but just, and as Chris was talking about the importance of data, I'm a firm believer that which is measured gets changed. I'm stealing that from someone, I don't know who that was, who said it first, but it's stuck in my brain. I wish the name stuck in my brain too, but that information, that little nugget stuck with me. And so, I'm at Loyola Academy in the Chicagoland area, and work very closely with our HR director as the assistant principal for student services. And with my background in diversity work, have met with him regularly to really evaluate our hiring process. And one of the things that I have stressed is that it can't be a top down. So if you hear what Christina is saying, it's that it is a committee. When you're making these changes in your hiring process, it can't be just that person, that HR director in his or her office making these changes, because they, albeit they might be best practices, you need the buy-in from all constituents, all parts of your organization who will be implementing those changes. And that I think that has been a shift in thinking for folks here at Loyola Academy, is our department chairs, who do the majority of the hiring when it comes to our faculty, need to be part of the change and understanding the why behind the changes. Like, how is this connected to our mission? Why is it so important that our students have mirrors, have people who look like them, and have windows, those who have experiences different from their own? What does that do for our community? How does that make it that we are that much closer to fulfilling our mission as a school of women and men for others, who are loving, who are open to growth, who are committed to doing justice? So yes, for us, because we are a high school and we post, and this is the first time because we're casting a wider net, because we have done this work of understanding why it's important for us to have a diverse pool of candidates. Why I am saying, as I'm hiring a dean of students, I will not look at the resumes until we have a diverse pool. We have not done our work if we don't have a diverse pool of candidates. And we've gone through the process of how do we review resumes. We've gone through the process of, examining and understanding our implicit bias. We've gone through the process of trying to examine and dismantle this good fit that we have. And Chris alluded to that. That's something that we tend to say, this person is a good fit or isn't. Why? What is it about this person that is making him a good fit? Is it because, yes, he graduated from a Jesuit institution as well? Or is it because, of the degrees that he has that are similar to yours, or whatever that might be? So really examining that and trying to dismantle that idea, that notion. So we have used the National Association for Independent Schools. For those of you who are pre-K through 12th or whatever, that is where we've posted, in addition to making sure that our community is like on LinkedIn or on our social networks as well, and not just this was an affront, I think, to the ego of a lot of members of our community, is that it's not just on our website and we're resting on the laurels of who we are in the community for people to come to us. So we have to do the work of reaching out to others.
So some of the places that, or some of the things that we've done in terms of reaching out aren't necessarily just posting. Yes, we've posted on Indeed, for example, and we've gotten actually quite a few diverse candidates by posting on Indeed. But we've posted obviously at Jesuit schools, but a little bit more specific. For example, at Regis University, which is here in Denver, which is where I am at Regis Jesuit, we didn't just send it to their job board posting. We've created relationships with their diversity department at Regis University. And the diversity department at Regis University connected us with the multicultural club that they have the students participate in. And so I have both of them as contacts, and I will send out job postings. Whenever we have a job posting, I will send something specifically to the provost for diversity, and then to the moderator for the club at the university. We have here in Colorado, a Colorado Diversity Network that's similar to the National Association of Independent Schools, that's made up of all the independent schools in Colorado, which we are a kind of adjacent partner with. They do a diversity hiring fair each year, and we have gone to that hiring fair. But on top of that, I have also then sent to the list of all of the people who are involved in that Colorado Diversity Network, the posting that we have, in order for them to be able to spread it to their networks. We've created relationships with a couple of Hispanic serving institutions and a couple of HBCUs in order to have someone there that we're able to reach out to when we have a job posting and share that posting with as well. And that goes the same. We're working on creating those relationships with several of the fraternities and sororities that we have here in Denver. We've worked with them a lot in terms of the programming that they have for our students. And so now we're working with them a lot in terms of trying to create and expand that relationship so that it's not just for our students, but it's also for a way for us to be able to expand the postings that we have with those communities as well that are here in Denver. And then the last thing that we've done is we've gone to several different diversity hiring fairs that are national. Carney Sando is one of the programs that we've used, or one of the organizations that we used. We went specifically to their diversity hiring or program that they put on last year. And there are several others that are similar to that we're looking into to see about attending those hiring fairs in order to have those interviews more quickly. So it's not just about where am I putting my post and where am I leaving it, but a little bit more of what are the relationships that I'm creating in order to be able to send this to people who will then be able to share it with their own networks.
And on the topic of, diversity hiring fairs, I heard from a colleague, there isn't one. And my response was, well, let's create one. So if there is that need, then we have to fulfill that.
Which in a sense is exactly what happened here in Colorado with that Colorado Diversity Network. This is a group of independent high schools that said we want to hire for diversity, and there's no reason for us to be competing against each other. Why don't we help each other? Mm-hmm. So this way I know what positions are opened in other schools. So if, for example, we get a math teacher and we don't have a math position, but I know that the independent school down the street from us does, I can share that contact with them, because the idea is to get all of our schools to have more faculty of color in our school, as opposed to like I'm hoarding my contacts just for me. The more that we work together, the better that'll be for all of us. And I think kind of going along with that piece too is how can we create something within our schools that then helps retain the faculty that we hire. That would be, in a sense, that piece of looking internally too. It's not just a matter of getting people on our campus. It's a matter of keeping people on our campus. And if we don't have kind of a quorum on our particular campus, are there other schools that are near us, whether they be university or high schools? Like maybe we can pair together, but is there a way that we can join together in order to create a community that says we are the Jesuit schools that are all working together? Perhaps that's, I mean, in a way, it's something that we've started with the diversity director cohort that Jamal was talking about earlier. It's definitely been a support for all of us during this year. Something like that within the community is going to be really helpful too.
Such robust answers from both of you all, and I really appreciate that. I'm fiercely taking notes over here. I'm thinking, and again, I want to encourage anybody that might have a question, please, to use the chat. We will try and surface those questions and bring them forward into the question. And so I see one that just hit, and so I had a question, and then I'll hopefully come back to this one next one. You both talked about like building communities, committees to do the hiring. I'd love to hear you both talk a little bit about how do you do the internal work with admin and those that are sitting in the meetings, reviewing the resumes. What kind of formation do you think is, or things that you guys have thought about doing that help surface or center diversity, equity, inclusion ideologies in the interview process, in the resume process, that allow the conversation, like obviously once everyone's been interviewed, to be at the forefront as you're discerning between, outstanding candidates. So just what kind of formation are you doing with your committees or with your administration to get ready to do this well?
When it comes to the interviewing, the process?
Well, for you, Terri, I'm thinking, I know you've been at Loyola a few years, how have you kind of gotten yourself involved in changing the culture so that wider net is the norm and not the exception to maybe what was going on before?
Yeah, I've been at Loyola a good 7 months. But, I don't, it's not a secret that I have a background training in the art of participatory leadership, and the motto is, if it has to do with us, don't do it without us. So I'm very collaborative when it comes to change. And so I will just host just talking sessions and just asking a lot of questions first, because, in coming as a new community member, one of the things that I said I would do in this first year is date Loyola, really get to know, what is it that we're doing? Why are we doing it? And how can we do it better? and being a mission-driven leader, that is something that it's always in the forefront of my mind. Are we making these changes because it will bring us closer to fulfilling our mission, and then contradictorily, like, are we maintaining tradition? As we examine the traditions that we have or how we've always done it, is it bringing us farther from who we say we are and who we are called to be? Especially when it comes with the interview process and just really examining what that looks like, I've had a lot of conversations around the questions we're asking. And so in our presentation, we're very mindful about how we ask questions. And I know the way we framed it was asking questions based on their beliefs, which is not what we want. I don't want to know what you think, what you believe, because that's where you can just give me a BS answer. I want to know your skills. I want to know your experience. I want to know your background, because that tells me what you will do. Not how you will think, but what you will do once you are in our community. So when it comes around diversity, equity, inclusion questions, I ask very specific questions as to, if you are in a certain situation, what would you do, or what have you done? Give me an example. And I know when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of people, there's sometimes a negative connotation. And so I have flipped the script in talking about belonging, talking about acceptance, talking about being reflective, self-reflective in your own implicit bias, in your own privileges, and then having empathy. So we want our community members to feel a genuine sense of belonging. So those are the types of questions that I'm having with our department chairs and our hiring committees, and how we are choosing candidates who will help us to reach our goals and fulfilling our mission.
So we've also done some training, some very specific training. If you're going to be on any hiring committee on our campus, no matter what position, you have to go through the trainings that we're providing. And one of the trainings that we do is an implicit bias training. And then we follow that up with conversations around, how does this impact your involvement on a hiring committee? And the implicit bias training is also not a general implicit bias training. We have a trainer who comes in and does a very specific implicit bias for hiring, which I think is really helpful, because she helps to really focus in on what are some of the things that you might be asked. She starts general in terms of an implicit bias training. She starts very general, and then she hones in on what is it that you need to know, and what is it that you need to do. To Terri's point, what is it that you're doing when you're on that, when you're on a hiring committee? So that would be one of the trainings. We also have specific trainings with our department chairs, very specifically talking about culturally responsive teaching. This is something that we feel is really important for our teachers to know how to do. So I want to make sure that our department chairs understand what that is, so that then when the department chairs are doing the interviews, when they're participating in the interviews, it's something that's on the forefront of their mind as well. Like, I'm not just looking to see if this person can teach math. I'm looking to see how this person is really and honestly incorporating culturally responsive teaching in their math teaching. And that shouldn't be a question that only comes from the diversity person on the committee. That should be a question that the department chair is also thinking about. So the more conversations that we're having with the department chairs about how the goals that we have and the way that our mission is going to be exemplified. And when I say mission, I'm talking about our Jesuit mission, and how it's connected. The more that we have conversations with our department chairs about that, the more it's a part of their thought process as well. So those have to be continued conversations. A one-time training is not going to be enough. It can't be like, oh, check, we've done that training, we don't ever have to do it again because we already did it. Like, this needs to be a continued process. And that's something that for me is wrapped up and is kind of, in a sense, double dipping, because I'm not just talking to the department chairs about hiring, I'm also talking to department chairs about formation of their current department. So it works in many different ways.
Outstanding. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to surface one of the questions here from the chat. And Nora from Siena asks that they're in the middle of looking to hire diverse faculty. And our committee is working on this right now. It's been puzzling about how to present our definitions and justifications for this initiative to the rest of the college community. In particular, we're wondering how to emphasize the importance of hiring persons of color while also recognizing that candidates can support DE&IA work in many ways: academic expertise, pedagogical approaches, etc. We don't want our community to interpret this as, oh, it's okay to just keep hiring more white people as long as they do diversity work. Do you have suggestions about how to frame or communicate this effectively? It's a lot.
Terri has a great way of looking at that and a great phrase for it.
I do, yeah. I mean, I did mention like that BEAR method, but I often hear people ask that question of, are we hiring for diverse candidates, or are we hiring for the best candidate? And the answer is yes and yes. In framing, and communicating effectively what your goal is, it is simply put, if you are always in connection with the mission of your school and the needs of your student body, your community, then that conversation is easier to have and better communicated, because you are doing what is best for your student body, which is having faculty members who look like them, who come from similar backgrounds and experiences. And our students need that. And our students who, are white students, and I'm in a predominantly white institution here at Loyola, our white students need that too. So I'm always having conversations that we're not making these changes. And it's, I keep saying change, but this is a focus that is not just for our students of color. It is not just for the benefit of our students of color. It is highly beneficial for our students who are white. Having a socioeconomic diverse school population is beneficial to all of our community. And so in being as blunt as that is how you communicate, the need. It is connected to our mission. It is what's best for our student population, our school community at large. And yes, you are right. We have a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion who is a white woman who will tell me every day that her position is temporary because a person of color needs to be in this position. And I quickly tell her, you are qualified. I understand, why you are saying this and what your intent is behind it, but you are qualified for this position, and we have to, that how do we steer away from just hiring more white folks who are doing DEI work? We need those people, but when we're talking about those mirrors in the windows for our students, we need diverse candidates and people of color who are a part of our community and reaching and teaching our students as well.
Awesome, thank you. That was well stated. I like this question, and I only like it just because he's one of my colleagues and works about 50 feet from me on campus. But the question is not only how do you look at and prioritize intercultural competency skills But I'd even be interested in terms of how do you prioritize them when you're sorting candidates, but more importantly, how do you surface, or, you know, maybe this goes back to Terri was talking about questions, how might you surface and get at understanding or have folks be able to bring to the forefront, you know, their experiences and working interculturally, and how can, you know, and be able to display that in a way that is advantageous for their candidacy.
So I think that there are two ways that it's important for us to do this. The first is that there has to be something on the application that allows them the opportunity to express something that gives us an idea that they have some skills in this area. And honestly, that lets people know that we feel like this is important. Like if it's not mentioned at all on the application, then how do I know that this is something that you consider as important? How do I know that this is part of your mission? How do I know that this is the way that your mission expresses itself, right? Like, so it needs to be on the application in some way, some sort of bring this to me, highlight this for me. And then the second way is within the interview questions that Terri was talking about earlier. How am I asking? Not for your philosophy. How am I asking? Not for your theoretical, because I can give you the answer you want, because based on your question, I know what you want. But how am I answering a question that is concrete and gives you an example of how I put this into practice? Because that's really what we as interviewers want. We want to know, what does this look like beyond the theory? What does this look like in practice? And I know I have heard an awful lot of people talk the talk, but we need to know that they can walk the walk too. And if they can't give us a concrete example, then that lets us know something. Maybe they're super interested in learning how to do it, which is great. There's the need for that too, right? But maybe they just talk the talk and they don't actually know what to do beyond that. So the questions need to be in different places, not just in one.
Yeah, we have to remember that those who are applying to our school are interviewing us just as much as we are interviewing them. So to Chris's point of having a question on the application that gives a little more insight into what we value as a school is important. I know one of the first things that I look at when I'm applying for a job is what's their diversity statement or mission. You know, what does the faculty and staff look like? You know, and those are questions that I bring to the table as well. If they're not asked of me, I ask those questions. And so if I have to ask the question as the person being interviewed, you know, that says to me, well, maybe this isn't important to them. And as the interviewer, I might ask a question that's very specific as well, instead of what the philosophy is.
I think that in a sense that goes back to my comment at the very beginning in terms of the internal work that we have to do first. Like, what does our website look like? How easy is it to find our diversity statement? If I'm only going to the employment page, on that employment page, does anybody who wants to apply have a clear understanding of where we stand regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion? Like, it should be super clear. And it's something that we've worked on. And I think that for us, it's still a bit of a work in progress. Like how can we make sure that when you go to our website, you don't have to search to see where we stand on this? It should be something that's really obvious.
Awesome. Well, two things. I'm gonna first off, thank you guys so much. I unfortunately have to leave you soon, and I'm gonna pass it off to Erin here in a second. But I'm gonna ask one last question that I think came up in some of the stuff, some pre-learning to the session. But again, I wanted to say thank you. It's always so good to be with both of you guys and listen to brilliance and your wisdom. And this kind of is like the flipping the coin would be, I don't know if you are engaged in in conversations at your school about when people don't fit the mission or don't live up to stated goals in the DE&I plus a space. How might we be involved in helping our leadership understand that those may be good people, but they aren't good for our institution, and therefore either the laying off or the dismissal of those folks. How do we articulate that in a way that makes it obvious that it's time to maybe think about some new energy, again, that's aligned with our mission, and particularly as it relates to diversity. And again, great to see you guys. Thanks,
Jamal. Thanks for being here with us. We really appreciate it. To that question, I think that I would back up a step from that. Like, how are we forming our people to really be able to engage in this in the first place? Like, if it's something that we're really committed to and really dedicated to, we can't just hire people and then say we're done. Like, we have to continue the formation, and we have to continue the training. There's an awful lot of people who are like, I would love to participate. I just don't know how. I feel I'm scared to do it. I didn't learn it myself. This is all new for me. I don't feel comfortable with this. Well, how can we create spaces in order to make them more comfortable, to bring them along on the process? Because for a lot of people, that's where a lot of it stems from, right? So I think that before we even get to the piece about the conversation about parting ways, like, how have we done as an institution the utmost to say, this is not only what we say we value, but we're really legitimately putting our money where our mouth is and saying, we're going to form you so that you are able to continue this work or to do this work that we're asking you to do. And then how do we evaluate you? In the sense of, like, okay, we really want you to do this, but there then needs to be some sort of evaluation process too, right? Like, we can't just say, oh, well, you don't fit you're not doing what we want you to do, so we're going to talk about parting ways because of mission. There should be several steps along the way that give us the opportunity to help guide people through this process, so that it comes down to well, you're not doing what we're really asking you to do. Look, here's what we're evaluating you on, because these are the things that are important for us. And we've created a training and we've created formation in order to bring you to that point. And then the conversation shouldn't be really that difficult, because we've explained to you and we've trained you and we've given you all this formation. So you know where we stand. It shouldn't be surprising. So then it becomes something that's similar to a conversation about, like, we're parting ways because of the teaching, or we're parting ways because of, for whatever other reason.
Are you jumping in, Erin? No, I was just, the only thing that I would add, I agree wholeheartedly with Chris's answer. One of the things that I would add is we talk a lot about our espoused values, what people find on our website, what's on our walls when you are walking through our hallways, I was going to say pamphlets and brochures. Do we still have those? But, what's written down, and making sure that what we say and who we say we are is reflected in our enacted values. So when we're having these conversations about hiring and retention, our school community is really feeling it, because we are having mandatory for so long. I think it's been kind of like an opt-in conversation. Do you want to be on this committee? But we maybe have had 5 or 6 trainings this year just on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging alone. And with faculty and staff, with students, with families, because this is a partnership, and this is all of us working together to make again, bringing it all to our mission, just making sure that we are really our actions are really, and decisions and programs and initiatives are really reflective of our mission. And we are able to, when we are questioned, why are we doing X, Y, and Z, bring it back to our mission every time. And that is how you effectively communicate why it is you're making these decisions, why are you making these changes. And that kind of either stops the questioning or has people coming in more to assist, and really proud that we are making sure that we are connecting and being in line with who we say we are and who we strive to be. We're at the stage where we are trying to implement that evaluative piece when it comes to the work in the classroom, the work amongst colleagues, and et cetera, to the conversation that we're having around people not having a conversation of like, is this the right place for you based on your participation or lack thereof? But people are starting to say, well, you know, if this is who we are, is this the place for me? So the thinking that is not in connection with or not in support of DEI work will become marginalized, because this is a serious conversation where this is not an initiative that's going away next year. You know, this is the community. This is who we are. And so that is, I you know, where folks are moving is instead of me having to have a conversation with someone about not renewing a contract, they are starting to internalize, okay, so maybe this is not the right fit for me. And it's, you know, past time for that to happen for our students, because for so long our students and our families have had to say, okay, I don't feel accepted. I don't feel like I belong. I am not celebrated here. I can't bring my authentic self. I need to find a new community. And that shouldn't be the case.
Thank you both. We have a few more minutes. I'm going to turn to a question that was submitted beforehand, but if anyone has any additional questions before we wrap up, you can continue to add those in the chat. So this question that was submitted beforehand, the individual writes, how do you balance sharing the reality of, in this case, being a predominantly white institution with leadership teams that are predominantly white, and the striving, meaning working to become a more inclusive and equitable space in the context of an interview process, so that a candidate knows they might be one of very few BIPOC individuals on a team or in an institution, but also conveys that the work of building a more just and equitable space is something that the institution is committed to?
I think that this is a really fair question, especially because when you think about somebody walking onto the campus and looking around and noticing that nobody else looks like me, and what does that mean in terms of my acceptance here, right? There could definitely be some trepidation there. So I think that it's really important for that to be something that the leadership within that interview process, whoever's on that interview process, I feel it's important for people to be explicit about that and to say, like, this is something that we're striving for. This is us historically. Let's not pretend that we're not a predominantly white institution. Let's not pretend that our history is something that it isn't. But that doesn't mean that that's what we want to continue doing. And we're very dedicated to this. And these are the steps that we're we're making to make those changes. I mean, it goes to Terri's point earlier, the candidates are interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing them. So what can we share with them to let them know that if they are to choose to come onto this campus, that there will be a support for them. They won't be like flying solo without anybody to be there to help them, that they will have a community that is going to be there to lift them up and to give them not just guidance, but support, right? And that this is something that leadership is really committed to. And I don't think that that's something that you can pretend or ignore. I think it's something that should be really transparent in that conversation. And honestly, I think it's something that should be transparent with the non-BIPOC individuals who are interviewing. I feel like that's something that every candidate should have had knowledge of. Going back to Terri's point about, like, sometimes if we know that this is part of our mission and we know that this is one of our goals, we want people who are coming onto our campus who share that understanding. So I think it's important to share with every candidate.
I will speak from the I perspective, and just where we are as a community. And as, again, I shared at the beginning, I'm in month 7 at Loyola, and I am the only person of color on the admin team. And I knew that coming in, but the questions that were asked of me in the interview around diversity, equity, and inclusion, the research that I did beforehand, and knowing that there was a director of diversity, and although this is her first year, there is a director of school culture here. So I knew that the work was happening. And in the line of questions that they were asking me, I could sense that they were looking for someone who could help further this work along. So that was very important to me. So I knew the reality of what the faculty and staff looked like, but the questions around what they were striving for made this an appealing community for me as a person of color. And so I think just being very honest with where you are and where you're striving to be with your candidates is ideal. It's something that you should be, very honest about. Because I know, again, speaking from the I perspective, when I was offered the job, I sat with our principal and I said, I just want to be completely honest. If this work is not serious to the community, this is not a good place for me. And so just making sure that, your candidates will, and if you hire, this person, they will quickly discern whether or not you were being honest with who you are and representing your community.
Yeah, it's not something that we can hide, right? Like, we can't pretend to be something and then not really be truly dedicated to it, because then that will spread in the community as well, right? Like, oh, well, they say that they do this, but they actually don't. Once I got there, this is what I found. Like, right. That's also detrimental. So being really honest about where we're at in the process, even if it's at the very beginning, like, we are at step 1, but we are dedicated to moving towards step 2. It might take us a long time, but we're dedicated to that. Here is our goal, and here are the steps that we're taking to ensure that that goal happens, not just here is our goal and we don't really have a pathway to get there. I think being really honest about that is really very, very valuable. And there will be some people who might be like, oh, you guys are at step 1. I'll come back and check in with you when you're on step 10. And others will be like, you know what? I really want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of growing it. I want to be a part of helping you figure out how you go from step 1 until step 2. And so I'm going to jump on and I'm going to be that person.
But letting people know that is really important.
Thank you both. We have just a few minutes left. And before I make a few announcements, I do want to open it up to the two of you in case there are any things that maybe weren't touched on in the questions that were submitted, or any closing remarks that you might have or want to share.
Someone asked the question to Chris about her consultant, and I just wanted to let you know that I put that in the chat. But you know, when it comes to the implicit bias training and any of the training around hiring, that takes place with the HR director, myself, and our director of diversity, equity, inclusion. We work really closely with one another in partnership with those who are in charge of hiring. And it's, as Chris said before, it can't be a one and done. She and I were talking before this about, you know, what is the cycle of having those implicit bias training and making sure that new people are receiving that training who are new to hiring committees, but that there is not a, oh, this again kind of feeling when it comes to those who have gone through the training. So making sure that it is fresh and that it is relevant, it remains relevant in their training is important.
And for that reason, we use the consultant, but then we do a lot of in-house training after that as well, just because it has to be a continuous process. The only other thing that I will add in terms of closing is I'm really excited by the number of people who are interested in engaging in this conversation and who joined this call, because I think that that speaks really highly to the dedication that the Jesuit Network has in terms of furthering this as one of the goals and something that's part of all of our mission. I think that that's really important, and it's really encouraging to know that there are a lot of people who are really striving to figure out how can we do this on our own campuses.
Thanks. Rene actually asked if he could jump in with one last question. So I'm going to let him do that. If you do have to log off in the next few minutes, I'm just going to share in the chat the link to our next sort of call or Q&A in this series. But I'll turn things over to Rene for his question.
Thanks, Erin. Terri, Christina, thank you so much. Nice seeing you again. A quick question is, the other day I was telling someone that it seems like I'm actively working to dismantle the system that I benefited from. Even though I'm a person of color, I came from another Jesuit school. I was at Cristo Rey. My wife was another person of color, teaches Spanish here. So I am a participant of this system, right? So I'm wondering, what kind of resistance have you seen or pushback? Because I'm thinking about, there's a number of parents, once we start doing this work, that are going to have opinions. There's a certain, I don't want to generalize them, old guard, I would say, people who've worked 15, 20, 25 years in Jesuit schools, which is in many of our institutions, that may, you know, it may raise their eyebrows or have some questions. I guess in my mind, I've always thought it like, whoever comes in, because we're not there yet, like, I'm an evangelizer. We can convert them. We'll get them on board, right? But I know it's important. So I'm wondering if you face resistance or if you've heard stories from some of our colleagues about, yeah, this was a challenging piece for this particular group.
So I am one of those old guards. Like, I've been at my Jesuit school for 21 years, and this is a slow process, and that's okay. Because I think sometimes you have to be ready, right? And there's some prep work that goes into making it so that people are ready. And that's for anything when it comes to this particular like DEI work, right? But I also think that we have to recognize like what's going on in our outside world. You know, we're not living in a little bubble here. So there are things that are happening in the outside world that also influence. And right now, that's beneficial, honestly, for us, right? And so some of those things are things that, like, taking into consideration, how can I have conversations? How can I create relationships? How can I make sure that it's not just like a silo over here where I'm having this conversation, but that I'm incorporating as many different voices as possible into these conversations, so people have a chance to really express their worries, express their fears, and then we have a chance to talk through that and help people understand, as opposed to just mandating, right? That relationship piece is going to be really important in terms of helping people come on board and be willing to be supportive of this too, because it shouldn't just be coming from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. It should be coming from all of administration. It should be coming from all of leadership. It should be coming from every different direction. And sometimes that means that the time that goes before it is the time of creating relationships in order to help people understand why this is important.
I could echo everything. You know, I talked in the beginning about the art of participatory leadership. Like, you have to be inclusive when you are making these changes. You know, you can't just wake up tomorrow and send an email and say, this is our new policy, this is what we're doing, and this is why. Maybe you have done the work, but everyone else has not done the work and have a clear understanding as to why this is the direction we need to go into. When it comes to like resistance, I would say I haven't seen any resistance, but that resistance comes in many forms. It's like questioning it, you know, those queries, those concerns, the confusion that pops up when I have a department chair saying, but you know, I know this person, and why do we need to open it? Why do we need to post the position when I know that we have this ideal person? We're going to lose them. But you're going to lose 10 other ones if you don't go through this process and open it up and cast a wide net and really do diligence for everyone in this building. Yes, you might have a person who really knows that content, but cannot connect with students on all levels and all backgrounds and experiences, and that will be alienating for those students in the classroom. So just making sure, I've been in independent schools for the last 16 years, and there's a lot of like who you know, and we're trying to dismantle that, because there's privilege that comes from that, and access, and not everyone has that. So we're trying to be more equitable in our hiring process. You know, it might be that we end up and that person is still the best candidate. If they're not connecting, they probably aren't. So we have to do, we have to just be in continuous conversation around why it is that we are moving in this direction. How is it going to be for the betterment of the entire school community, and not just one department, not just one piece of our community, but for everyone.
Thank you both, and thank you again for being with us today. I know I certainly have learned a lot, and I'm really grateful for your presence, your expertise, and your time. I know you both had crazy weeks with a lot going on. I'm going to share a few announcements. Thank you all for being here with us too and submitting questions. Just a few announcements before we hang up. One, this session has been recorded, so I will send out the recording to anybody who is registered, so feel free to share it with colleagues who weren't able to attend or return to it later on. Secondly, we have one additional call or Q&A in this series, as I had mentioned earlier, for this semester, for this school year, and it will take place on April 15th. And it is about strategic planning specifically for diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So Deborah Richardson Phillips at St. Ignatius Cleveland and Carlos Jimenez from Bellarmine Prep in San Jose will be co-facilitating that Q&A. So feel free to sign up or share that with other folks in your institution. And then the last piece, not an action item for today, but we have been working here at ISN on putting together a survey around diversity, equity,
inclusion and anti-racism work, to learn a little bit more about what's happening in your institutions, and ultimately to inform our work and our plans for next academic year and beyond, what sort of programming you would like to see or conversations that you would like to see take place. So that survey will go out in the next few weeks, and we would be incredibly grateful for you to take a few minutes to complete it and also to share it with other folks in your institution. But more to come on that. Again, thank you all for being here today, and hopefully we'll see you in April.